Now, into the ticket office of Disneyland.
Oh boy, let's do this. Don't think the CIA is going to be trying to hack your second-gen iPod.
I didn't think so. There might have been a lot of illegal music on there. I wouldn't doubt it. But, I mean...
You were supposed to bring death to the flagships, not join them.
Google has found a new way to piss me off.
iTunes is a constant source of embarrassment.
Every time I say it, it's going to suck even more.
May I present to you the cat?
I am Nadella.
I can't do it anymore without laughing. I was going to do the whole thing.
Welcome, everyone, to the Calling All Platforms podcast. I am your host, Wes, and I'm here with Landon.
Hello.
And Caleb.
Hey.
And listener, we are here to talk all things tech this week, but also Caleb and I are suffering from colds and allergies. So sniffles and snorts and not
Coughing.
feeling good is going to be part of this. We'll see how well Landon's editing skills go.
I was going to say, it's the real test this week.
Yeah.
I will, listener, hopefully you won't hear any of them. But if you do, just know that there were way too many for me to find them all.
His work's cut out for it, but that's why we pay him the big bucks here. So this establishment we have.
Wait, when do these checks start rolling in?
Caleb said he'd talk to you about it. Anyway, let's
they're
go ahead.
A while because they're so big.
That's what it is. Those big checks fit into the car. Anywho, let's get into this show here, shall we? First thing on the docket we got is the Android Show I/O edition.
Yeah, this was the Google quote-unquote event where they're like, oh yeah, we have Android we need to talk about, but we can't put it into I/O because that's got to only be about Gemini. So what do we do? Oh, let's do it a week beforehand. That's what this is.
That's right, yep.
And it actually was better than I was expecting it to be. Because, it was about 22 or so minutes long, little YouTube video they did. It reminded me a lot of, all the videos Apple has done in the last few years, where it's just, obviously pre-recorded, scripted, and showcasing different little things about what they're talking about. And they just get straight to the point, get it over with, and it's good, it's nice. I mean, I guess in that sense, it is a little better than what Apple does, because they still tend to drag on about certain things.
Yeah.
Apple would have taken this 22-minute video and turned it into 45, because that's just what they do.
Apple also would have made a whole bunch of harebrained promises about artificial intelligence that they weren't ever going to be able to deliver on.
Yep. Expect that again.
And then had a class action lawsuit.
Yeah. Expect that to happen again in June at WWDC. Anyways, this is talking about Android this time. So I took some notes on it, and there was actually, like I said, there was a lot more to this than I was expecting there to be, and they packed quite a bit of stuff into this 20-minute video. The first thing that I want to mention is the biggest part that came out of this video was Material 3 Expressive. This is basically the new design language behind what they are doing on Android. And this is not going to, this is what's going to be on all Pixel phones, but not necessarily what you might see on a Samsung or a OnePlus, because they take the base of what Android has and kind of do their own thing. But Google has also said this is going to be what we are encouraging developers and OEMs to try to utilize, because they do want some sort of, recognizable UI between all the different devices that run Android. But obviously there's going to be some tweaks that everyone does. But I actually really like this new design language that they're going with. It's kind of like, the way I put it here is it's a bigger take on material design, literally, because a lot of the buttons are they just look bigger. Some of them actually are bigger. Some of the touch points are larger. It's I heard it described somewhere as senior mode by default. So if you have a grandparent or somebody that basically turns up the text to the largest size and the buttons to like everything's at, bigger fonts and bigger buttons and everything. It's kind of like that by default, but it actually looks really good. It's weird. I don't really know how to explain it. You just need to go look at it for yourself, listener. They're also one thing that I do like on this is inside the quick settings. They have a bunch of different quick settings you can put in there, but you can now resize those buttons in there. It actually reminds me a lot of what you can do on iOS right now, where you can move around the different quick settings, choose the ones that you want, but then you can make them as small as you want or bigger, depending on how important the quick setting. If you want something a little more easily accessible, you can make it a little bigger. It's easier to find, easier to touch. Kind of nice. They're adding some more animations to this new design language where they are, and it's not like animations for the sake of animations. Like these actually make a lot of sense. It's kind of how you would expect things to respond depending on what you're doing with it. So one or different ways people have described this is it's kind of springy. So like when you are done scrolling, it kind of like bounces kind of, but not like a ton. It's not like you have to wait 5 seconds for it to stop before you can do anything. It just gives a little bit of a spring bounce effect when you're done scrolling or, things like that. Other people described it as it just looks more natural. Like I said, how you would expect things to animate based on what you're doing on your device. And the videos I've seen of it, I actually really like what they've done here. Another thing they've added, and this is something I don't think it was like a base thing inside of Android, but it may have been added to Pixel devices. I can't remember, but live updates. It's basically what iOS does with live tracking, where if you have, say you have like a food delivery app, it will kind of give you a live notification that tells you the different steps of where your food is or whatever app that you're using. They're doing basically the same thing where it'll have a little thing up at the top. They're not doing like the dynamic island, but it acts very similarly. So it doesn't go across your camera like how on iOS it does, but it has a small little button type thing in your notification tray, or not tray, like the little thing right at the very top of the phone or the display. And you can tap on that and it'll expand the notification out. Or if you're on your lock screen, it'll just have that little notification there that you can interact with and do different things with. Yeah. I actually really like this. I do utilize this on iOS. I think it's really nice. It's a very neat feature to have. And as long as developers utilize it well, it can be a really handy thing. And where it has been on iOS for a while, it's not like it's going to be difficult for app developers to put it onto their Android app. So that's nice.
Yeah.
They also mentioned how the Material 3 Expressive stuff is coming to Wear OS as well. And I actually really, really liked how they utilized this design language on Wear OS. Not that Wear OS looked bad before, but this just looks so much better. It's really nice. I'll get to talking about Wear OS a little more later, but I just wanted to mention how Material 3 Expressive is coming to Wear OS. They did mention that Material 3 Expressive is not going to be on Android 16 at launch. It's going to be coming later, which I found kind of odd. But from what I've heard, that this Material 3 Expressive will be on the QPR1 beta. So basically, Android 16, like the stable version, will launch, and then the beta that comes out right along with that, which will basically be the next version, a beta version of the next version of the main release, is going to have this new design language on it. So at launch, it won't be on Android 16, but then the next major update will probably have this new Material 3 Expressive design language there. So you won't have to wait super long, depending on the device that you have, to get this. Or if you want to get onto the beta, wait till the main version of Android 16 comes out, and then get on the beta, and then you'll have this new version. So, kind of cool. They also said it will be coming to Pixel devices first. That includes Pixel phones and the Pixel Watch for this new design language, and Android 16 in general, because that's just how it works. Samsung did announce, though, that the Galaxy devices will be getting Android 16 this summer. So they obviously probably won't have, they're going to have their own version, their own skin on top of Android 16, but they will be getting Android 16 later this summer. So that's actually pretty quick. And Google also said other manufacturers also plan to put Android 16 onto their devices in this summer. So that's nice to have Android 16 on a larger amount of devices within the first couple months of it being available. That's a new thing that I really hope stays and keeps happening because that's always been a problem. It's like, well, I don't have a Google device. I have a Samsung device. Am I going to get it next month or next year? That used to be a thing. Now it's a lot more normal for devices to actually get updates a lot sooner.
Yeah.
Now, on to Wear OS 6. Like I said, it's going to be getting this same Material 3 Expressive design language, and like I said, it looks really great. They didn't have a date for when Wear OS 6 will be launching. They just said coming later this year. Maybe next week I guess this week at I.O. they will give a little more details on that. We'll have to wait and see on that one. They also mentioned that it's tailored more towards round displays, which makes sense because the Pixel Watch is a round display, and most Wear OS watches are round displays. There are a few rectangular ones out there, but the vast majority of them are round. And like I said, it just looks so much better, and I'm very much looking forward to this becoming the new version of Wear OS. It makes me, if I ever switch back to Android, actually consider getting a Wear OS watch versus I would probably going to get a Garmin watch, but I actually like the look of it, so maybe I would lean that way again.
There you go.
They also mentioned that Wear OS 6 will increase battery life up to 10% on most watches, so never going to complain about a software enhancement that's going to give you better battery life. That's always a good thing.
Oh, no.
And then, the feature that everybody was waiting for, Gemini built into Wear OS.
Oh boy!
Nobody, you're not clapping with joy, Wes. I mean, come on.
Well,
no, not really.
Now I think the most used feature with Gemini, it's basically going to be replacing the Google Assistant, and it is getting better at doing those things. And it can be used standalone, like you don't have to have it connected to your watch to use Gemini, or connected to your phone to use Gemini. You can do it on your, it will work on device. Some things, obviously not everything will work very well, but some things will work on device. And then when you do pair it up again with your phone, then it will integrate more into the whole Google ecosystem a little better that way. So I don't think it's going to be anything that anybody is clamoring for, but I do think it will be beneficial. So there's that. And speaking of Gemini, the next thing I wanted to talk about is some Gemini stuff, because obviously they couldn't just talk about Android stuff. They had to mention Gemini at this Android-specific part of whatever. They announced that Gemini is going to be coming to more devices this year, and that includes Google TV. So you're going to have Gemini on Google TV, which actually, like the devices they mentioned, I think it actually makes sense to have Gemini on, because if you have a Google TV with a remote that you can talk to, being able to talk to it in a more realistic way makes a whole lot more sense. Like with Assistant, you kind of had to say certain phrases or certain things to have it understand what you were saying. Having Gemini in that sense really makes a lot of sense. So I'm fine with that. They also mentioned that they're going to be bringing it to cars, and that includes Android Auto. So that's like Android. Well, I don't know if it's Android Automotive or Android Auto, or there's too many. They mentioned Android Auto and then cars with Google built in. So I'd assume that's the Android Automotive. I don't. They have too many things going on.
Love that there's a distinction between those two.
Yeah. But they did say it will come into Android Auto first and then cars with Google built in. So I'm assuming that's the Android Automotive side. And this one actually made the most sense to me because like they were saying it's going to have shorter responses when you're in a vehicle because it's obviously makes it a little less distracting when you're driving. And with Gemini Live, you can actually basically just have a regular conversation with it. And it's basically like just as if you had somebody there in the car with you and you were talking to them. So if you have like one of the videos I saw of them showcasing this was the person was saying, I've got a meeting with my boss and I need to discuss this. How should I go about this meeting? And it would just have that little conversation with you. I actually think that's really helpful and kind of cool. And like I said, in a more natural talking way, it makes a lot of sense to have something like that rather than Google Assistant in your car because it's a little less distracting. Obviously, it's still kind of distracting because technically talking to somebody, even if they're in the car with you, is going to distract you a little bit from what you're doing driving. But this makes it, just like I said, more natural, a lot easier, slightly less distracting than it would have been previously.
Yeah.
So I'm okay with that. As long as you're not asking Gemini to create music for you to listen to on the car. That's weird.
Oh, gosh, please don't.
Yeah, that would be odd. The last thing that they mentioned Gemini coming to is some mixed reality headsets. They didn't really talk that much about this because I'm assuming they're saving most of that for this week at I.O. And they also said that mixed reality headsets with Gemini will be coming this year sometime. So I guess we're going to be seeing some new headsets, whether from Google. I know we're getting some from Samsung. Maybe, well, not Meta because they use their own crap. But other companies might be making some mixed reality headsets that are going to have Gemini built in. So there you go. Have that to look forward to, I suppose. And then the next thing I wanted to talk about that came out of this Android Show I.O. edition was they are renaming the Find My Device app / functionality to Find Hub. I don't know why. I mean, it kind of makes sense because it's not just like devices that you're utilizing this stuff. There's a lot of things that now, like even Apple, like their stuff is like you can use Apple devices or Apple's Find My for a lot of different things. So it kind of makes some sense. It's just kind of it's like, why change it? I don't know. Maybe because people are confusing it from Apple's Find My, and this is Find My Device. It's like they're basically the same thing. I mean, they work.
Yeah.
Functionality-wise, they really are basically the same thing. So
yep.
I guess if you want to have some sort of distinguishing factor, the name is the only thing you can really do. They did say they're going to be adding UWB support. Now it is ultra-wideband support. Finally.
Very good.
Why that wasn't a thing before, because the Pixel phones have ultra-wideband. The Pixel Watch has UWB. It's like, why wasn't this already just there? But that is coming. And they also mentioned that the Motorola's Moto Tag has UWB support, so it will be one of the first devices to be able to utilize that. Very nice. They also mentioned that they're going to be having some Find Hub compatible luggage from July, apparently, I guess is a luggage manufacturer, and Mokobara, I don't know. So luggage that will have Find Hub support built into them. And I would imagine it's just going to be a UWB type platform that you could also use Apple's Find My with. I actually don't hate that because then you don't have to buy just a separate Air Tag or a Moto Tag or something like that to put in your luggage. Yeah. It's just built right in.
Yeah, that is kind of nice.
They did mention that you can use this luggage or even just a tag, and you can partner with whatever I don't know about all airlines, but different airlines. So they also can help you find your luggage. I'm like, don't do that because one, they already know where your luggage is, despite the fact that they will tell you they don't. They do.
Or they should.
They definitely should. And two, they don't need any more information about you than, I mean, not that airlines get that a ton of information about you, but you don't need to give them more. Because also, are they going to stop tracking your luggage after you get home? We don't know. We don't know. So maybe don't do that. They also mentioned that there will be coming some Disney themed luggage tags like that have this UWB support built right in. So if you want to have some cool little luggage tags that you can switch instead of buying like built in or have it built into your luggage, because you don't need to buy new luggage because the luggage is expensive for some reason. You can just buy the luggage tags that look kind of fun. You can get Buzz Lightyear or Stitch or, random characters in the Disney ecosystem. Kind of cool. And they're also going to be a lot cheaper.
Well, now Disney needs to sell you those except as a pin that you can just put on your kid.
Oh, that would be amazing.
Then you can dispense with the little backpacks with a leash on them.
They really ought to, like the little wristbands that you get at Disneyland, they ought to just have UWB built into those that you can pair with your phone when you get there. So,
they really should.
That would be so smart.
Yep.
Oh, man, we should start working at Disney.
No, and in fact, then they could do the fast passes like completely hands off.
Yeah.
Like you wouldn't have to use the app or anything. You could just, in fact, you know what they could do is they could just have like a spot where you could go and scan the NFC tag in your wristband to reserve a fast pass for a ride that just has a window of time you come back in, and you can have like, I don't know, maybe 2 of those reserved at a time. And then you just come back during that window to scan it at the entrance to the fast pass lane and do that. It would be really great if they didn't charge you extra for that feature as well, like they're currently doing. Basically, just bring back the fast passes, Disneyland, you freaking idiots.
Seriously. Anyways, they also mentioned that satellite connectivity will be coming sometime this year for the Find Hub, which that's also really nice because then you don't have to rely on it like being anywhere super close or having other devices around it to help you find it. If it's got satellite connectivity, and say you go camping and you forget something in your campground or wherever, and there's just doesn't happen to be anybody nearby that can connect to let you know that you're there, or there's just no cell service or anything like that.
Get the signal out,
yeah. So that's a nice little feature.
Though I would imagine that that's probably only going to apply to more advanced devices in the network that actually have the ability to power themselves and power a satellite connection, as opposed to, you're not going to get that out of something the size of an AirTag is what I'm saying.
No, it's going to be more like phones and computers and things like that.
Like the actual devices.
Yeah. All right. And the last thing I wanted to talk about with this Android show was some new security features coming to Android 16. They've got this thing called Advanced Protection Mode. And basically, like, you could have this in your quick settings where you have a little button that you turn on and it activates basically all of the security features right there. Like, they were saying this is for people that are in like high profile situations, like politicians, celebrities, people that don't want any of their information getting out. Now, obviously, they can't protect against everything because there's this thing called the internet that people can get onto and find out stuff. But things that are on your device or communications between certain people can be a little more protected when you turn this on. That's and it's just like I said, one little button push and all these features get turned on or turned off depending on how you're using your phone. That's really kind of cool. And then they also have this new factory reset protection that basically is going to make it so stealing Android phones is not going to be useful for anybody. I mean, Apple's kind of done this with iOS because if you steal an iPhone now, you can't do anything with it. And it's basically turning the same thing with an Android device. So if you want to try to reset the device, it just says it blocks all device functions until the original Google account credentials are input into the phone. So, like I said, basically like what it is on Apple, and I really like that. So it just makes it so stealing phones doesn't do any good for the person stealing the phone because they can't do anything with it unless they have your information. And if somebody that has your information is stealing your phone, you shouldn't be friends with them anymore.
Yeah, fair enough.
Not.
But that's basically the main stuff I wanted to talk about from this Android show, IO edition. If you want to learn more, they do have a blog post about it. You can go watch the video. The blog post actually goes into a little more detail about certain things than what they do in the video, but it was kind of nice. I do appreciate that they had this a week before I/O, so we could actually talk about the Android stuff a little bit instead of it just being a 10-minute blurb that they put at the end of the keynote after all the Gemini stuff. Because we all know that's really what they're going to be talking about at I/O this week is just Gemini.
Yeah.
And you'll hear that from us next week because, again, it happens this week and we'll be talking about it then. So have that to look forward to, I suppose.
So exciting.
Oh, yeah.
Well, let's go ahead and let's move on here. We have another event, Samsung Galaxy S25 Edge.
Yeah, this wasn't really an event, more of just, hey, you can buy this now, because they did announce this phone with the other Galaxy S25 phones back in January. It's just we didn't have any specs or details about when we could get it, what the price was going to be. And now we have all that information. So let's go over the specs really quick. This has a Snapdragon 8 Elite chip in it. It's got an AMOLED display, 6.7-inch display. It's got 12 gigs of RAM. You can get it with 256 gigs or 512 gigs of storage. It's unfortunately, because of how thin it is, only has a 3,900 milliamp hour battery, but we were expecting that to be the case. And from what I understand, it is also not a silicon carbon battery, because that would have been too easy to make it a smaller battery and actually give us good, decent battery life. It's too bad.
Yeah.
It has 25 watt charging speed, and that is both, I'm assuming that's both wired and wireless, because it has both wired and wireless charging options. It is launching with Android 15, obviously, because Android 16 is technically not out yet. The front camera is a 12 megapixel sensor. On the back, it only has 2 cameras. It's got the 200 megapixel main sensor, which is the same sensor that's on the Galaxy S25 Ultra, I believe. And then that has up to 10x digital zoom. And then it's got a 12 megapixel ultra wide sensor that I think is the same sensor that's on the S25 and S25 Plus. It does not have a third telephoto sensor, which is too bad because the other phones all have at least the 3 cameras. So that's fun. It is IP68 water and dust resistance. It comes in titanium silver, titanium jet black, which titanium is not black, so that's fun, and titanium icy blue. So there you go. Silver, black, or a very slight hint of blue on that other one. And then the starting price on this phone is $1,100. Now, that actually does make some sense because the specs are right in between the S25 Plus and the S25 Ultra, and this price is also right in between those 2 phones. So I can't fully complain about that because it does make sense. I was actually expecting it to be more because of how thin it is. I'm trying to find here. I think it's 5.8 millimeters thin, which is pretty dang. It's like, from the videos and articles I've read and seen and stuff, people say pictures don't fully do this justice. Yeah, you can have it next to an S25 or S25 Ultra and see how much thinner it is, but people are like, it's actually very noticeable when you hold this device how much thinner and lighter it truly is than other phones.
Yeah.
Like, people were more impressed with it than I was expecting them to be.
Here's my thing. And this is, I suppose, a personal preference based on personal priorities. But I feel like this is probably going to be closer to the read for most consumers than it is for most tech journalists. The issue I have with the price is not necessarily that it doesn't make sense inside of their product stack. It says, this price says, we are positioning this phone as a slightly more premium version of the phone than our regular phone, but also slightly less premium than our ultra high-end flagship, right? This is in between those 2. But to me, what it says is we consider this thing to be more valuable than the phone that we literally cut in half. it is less than this other phone in terms of both material cost and probably component cost. And yet, we're charging more. This thing's margins are probably great for Samsung at that price point.
Yeah.
And like essentially what they're telling me is, hey, we took away some stuff and we're charging you extra for it. That's not okay. That's it's the Porsche 911 GT3 treatment, right? Where we took away all the carpets, we took away all of the sound deadening, we took away everything that made the car comfortable or luxurious or anything like that. And that we're charging you like $100 extra grand for it, for the privilege of driving a car where the door handles are made out of like fabric, nylon strand. Like just that's okay. Thanks, Porsche. Yes, I get that it's essentially a road going race car. I understand that the value they claim to be providing is how fast it is. But listener, unless you live on a race course, there's no point. Regular 911s go faster than you're ever going to be able to drive them on the road anyways.
Yeah.
So unless you are tracking this car every day, there's no point to it. And instead, Porsche is saying, hey, we're selling you way less car and charging you double the money for it. And that's what this feels like from Samsung. It feels like, here's less phone, it costs extra. Nobody cares that it's thinner and lighter. If people that want a lighter phone, and believe me, there are people out there who would like a lighter phone. I'm one of them. But we don't want it to be thinner. We want it to be smaller physically. Nobody wants this. Anyways, yeah, I like Landon. I have heard some opinions from the people that have just barely gotten their hands on it, been able to hold it. And everyone is expressing, yeah, it's actually kind of crazy how light this thing is. Not even so much how thin it is, just how little it weighs in the hand. And they're like, that seems like the killer feature. They all seem impressed with it, but these are all first impressions.
Yes.
And I suspect that after living with the thing for a week, every single one of them is going to be like, I don't think it's worth it.
Yeah.
That's my prediction.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up because all these articles and videos about this phone right now are just that. They are first impressions, and that's it. There is still an embargo on actual reviews for this phone, and so we have to wait to see what that is. I'm very curious to see just how well this chip can handle how thin it is. Because the Snapdragon 8 Elite chip does boast a lot more efficiency for how much power it produces. But this phone is so thin, it's going to get warm. There's no way they can, in that small of a device, have any sort of cooling mechanism inside of there to help that chip. So either the chip is going to be throttled software-wise by Samsung, and or it's going to get pretty warm. And I can see both of those being the cases. Or it's going to be throttled
by the laws of physics.
Yeah,
Either Samsung will throttle it in software or physics will throttle it in hardware.
Exactly. So, yeah, we still have to wait to see just how good this phone actually is. I don't expect it to be a bad phone by any means. Samsung doesn't generally make bad phones in most of its price ranges, but definitely in the higher price ranges. I expect it to perform similar to the S25 and S25 Plus when it comes to how it functions and cameras and stuff like that. It's just, I don't really expect it to be anywhere close to the Ultra by any means, because it's not an Ultra and it's thinner. And the biggest thing I'm also curious about is battery life, because smaller battery means less battery life in most cases. And like I mentioned, this phone starts at $1,100, and it will be hitting shelves on May 30th. So just a couple weeks. I do believe you can start pre-orders right now, and there are going to be different deals from different companies. Samsung has different deals. All the carriers are going to have different deals. So if you want to get it, this might be the time to do it, because usually most of these deals are for pre-orders, and some of these deals end after pre-orders are available, so keep that in mind. But yeah, it's an interesting device. And I'm also curious to see what Apple does with their version of this phone, because we all know that's coming as well.
Yeah.
And I don't expect it to be that much, if any, better than this one.
No.
So.
Nope. If anything, it's going to be worse. If anything, it's going to come out, they're going to be like, it's even thinner.
Oh, gosh.
Also, the battery is like 1,500 milliwatt hours, but that's fine. It'll last an hour.
Yeah, and only burn you for 5 seconds because then it shuts off.
Right.
No, that's awesome. Okay. We're going to go ahead and we're going to move on. We're going to get some Apple news. Tim and Tim are at it again. And that is not Tim the Tool Man.
No. If only, that would be so much more entertaining.
Yeah.
No, this is already pretty entertaining as it is. So, you know, we talked last episode, listener, about the good thing that had happened with the judge ordering Apple to just stop being idiots and actually, you know, do what they said or what they're supposed to do. And as a response to that, Tim Sweeney was all like, we're going to put Fortnite back on the iOS store worldwide kind of thing. Like, it's already back on iOS in the EU because of the Digital Markets Act and the fact that Epic was able to set up an external app store that they were able to sell Fortnite through because of all that. So for the EU, Fortnite's already been back on iOS for like a year now, okay? But he's like, no, the rest of the world gets Fortnite now because this happened. Like, we're like, now we're happy, so we're going to do it. So Epic's developer account for iOS got killed. Like, Apple straight up canceled it when all of this started back in like 2019 or whenever it was. And so the Epic had to stand up a new developer account in Sweden. Epic Sweden had to start one in order to have the Epic Game Store in the EU and all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so they just resubmitted a global distribution for Fortnite to the App Store via that developer account. And then they didn't hear back from Apple in the review process for like a week. And so they resubmitted it. Like, they pulled it and resubmitted a slightly newer version of it, and then never heard back from Apple. And so then Tim Sweeney takes to Twitter where he Tim, stop tweeting. Just stop. It's not good. So he took to Twitter, started whining about how Apple was blocking Fortnite in the world, like across the world. And because they were blocking this, Epic wasn't going to be able to like have Fortnite anywhere. And so Fortnite in the EU via Epic's own game store was no longer going to work. And so that's what he was saying, that Apple was blocking Fortnite. And Apple responded to that with a statement that's all like, no, we're not. Like, you've got the Epic Game Store that's been accepted. You can put Fortnite on there, do whatever the crap you want. Like, that's not ours. We're not going to let you put it on the App Store in the US. But if you want to resubmit it for delivery in the EU, go for it. But they didn't do that. So if you play Fortnite on an iOS device, Tim Apple and Tim Sweeney don't want you to. Neither of them. Tim Sweeney's got a bone up his butt, and Tim Apple honestly seems like he couldn't care less. So that's okay, because in the long run, it's just Fortnite. There's better things you could be doing with your time anyways.
Yeah.
It's just Fortnite.
But yeah, so there you go. Tim and Tim, they're having a good time. Every time Tim Sweeney tweets about Apple, it's like, it's not even necessarily that he's not saying things that I agree with. Like, a lot of the stuff that he complains about with Apple, I'm all like, it's valid. But Tim, have you looked in a mirror recently? Because I feel like I feel like you get a lot of this own fodder just by doing that. Like, is Apple doing it? Yeah. Are you also doing it? Yep. It's great. It's great.
Awesome. All right, we're going to move on to some general tech news. We got Intel sorta confirmed the Arc B770 and the B780.
Yeah, so this was it's so hard to say what the heck is going on with this. So Intel this past week started released some promotional photos and stuff like on Twitter and Instagram, social media platforms and whatnot that were basically just like, hey, get hyped for Intel. We've got announcements coming at Computex next week and all this stuff. And a bunch of people on Twitter were replying and saying stuff like, hey, give us a B770, give us an Arc B770. Because, listener, right, like we have the B580 and the B57 or B560, right? These are the graphics card that Intel has launched from their Battle Mage line of GPUs this year. And the B580, or actually, I guess the end of last year, B580 is widely regarded to be the best bang for the buck GPU that you can buy in this modern day and age. And in fact, if you listen to most of the reviewers, it's the only one they actually recommend. If you can get that thing at MSRP, which generally speaking, you actually can, it's great, right? Like, that's the takeaway. This is like the one GPU people recommend. And so everyone's like, last year we had a 770 version, right? A 70 quote class card. Let's get a B770 from this generation. Let's get a 70 class card that competes with the lower end stuff from AMD and NVIDIA at a slightly better price, or slightly higher price. We would love to see actual competition. So, bunch of comments on their posts saying stuff like this. And to like the vast majority of them, the Intel Twitter account was doing stuff like, hey, you've got great taste. Stay tuned. Or, like the big, like looking eyes emoji, like we'll see you next week. And stuff like that. Like, just not denying any of this, but not actually saying, well, you called it. That's what we're releasing next week or anything like that. So it's not clear if this is just a bot that Intel has on Twitter that is replying to every reply to their post with a stay tuned for next week generic comment, or whether this is an actual social media person at Intel going, well, these people are kind of on the money, but we're going to be cryptic because we want to stir up hype. It's unclear which of those is happening, but there's at least some possibility that we're actually getting a mid-range graphics card from Intel at Computex this week. So fingers crossed.
Wow. Nice. Guess we'll find out. Might be good news for you. Might be bad.
Yeah. Tentatively kind of optimistic about this one.
All right. We're going to switch over to streaming, but Max is HBO Max again.
Yep. I mean, that headline is pretty much the entire the entire thing. Like, hey, listener, remember when HBO Max changed their name to just Max to indicate that Warner Brothers Discovery had put a whole bunch of crap onto the ostensibly prestige TV streaming service? Well, they decided it was a bad idea to get rid of their entire brand.
Yeah.
So they've added the brand back.
Well, it's so dumb because, going back to it is not dumb, but changing it in the first place was dumb because anytime I had told anybody, oh, it's on Max, they're like, what's Max? Oh, HBO Max.
HBO.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
on
Yeah.
HBO.
HBO.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Or as my kids like to call it, Hobo.
Hobo Max.
Hobo Max.
I mean, it made absolutely no sense because, everybody knows what HBO is. Whether you've watched an HBO show or not, you know what HBO is. Max?
Oh, yeah.
That's just a name, you know?
Yeah.
Yep. Well, and I think my favorite part about it is the reason they did it was ostensibly because it wasn't just HBO shows anymore,
Yeah.
right? Like Warner Brothers Discovery was bringing all of their shows to it as well. And so it was going to be more than just HBO. So they're like, okay, so we get rid of the HBO brand and it encompasses all of this stuff. Here's the problem with that. Nobody actually wants to watch anything made by Warner Brothers Discovery. The only reason anybody watches anything on that app is because of HBO. So that's the only name that's going to sell anything.
Yeah.
So just leave it. Like, you can add the rest of your garbage slop reality TV content, Discovery. That's fine. But the only reason anybody's showing up is for, you know, your Game of Thrones spinoff and your Chernobyl miniseries and your what's most recently been happening with HBO. I'm sure something extremely well regarded and prestigey. I'm actually gonna have to check now.
You know, I always forget.
bugging me.
I do have Mac or HBO Max, and I forget that I have it half the time because there's not a lot of shows that I watch on there.
Yeah, okay. I'd totally forgotten that The Last of Us,
Yeah, that's a big one.
Season 2 of The Last of Us, that's a thing that's happening.
There you go.
White Lotus, that's also a thing that I have heard about for sure. Yeah, I don't know half of what all is on here, to be clear, because I don't really watch anything on HBO. But it's extremely well regarded stuff.
Yeah.
And the only reason any of it has ever sold is because of HBO. So no, it was dumb to rename it. It makes a lot of sense to bring it back. And it sort of is nice to see these executives just kind of rolling over and taking it. Like, yeah, market research does kind of indicate that we screwed the pooch on that rebrand. So sorry, we'll change it back.
That's funny. Well, I don't know. Maybe we're just old and we just like it saying HBO too. So who knows? All right, we'll go ahead and talk about a standalone ESPN service.
Yeah, listener, I remember we mentioned that Disney was thinking about doing this months ago. Like, they had mentioned doing something like just branching ESPN channels out on their own little thing. And then they came out with ESPN Plus, but that's not regular ESPN. That is stuff that's not typically what you're going to find on their ESPN channels on television. It does have some of that stuff, yes, but it is also a lot of sports that, again, aren't necessarily going to be on TV, and you have to pay a little different plan to get that and whatnot. But now they have announced that you can just get ESPN, that's what it's called, just ESPN, for $30 a month. And you can get, that includes all of what's on ESPN Plus and all of the ESPN channels that are available on regular television. So like ESPN, ESPN2, ESPN News, ESPNU. They've got channels for SEC Network, the ACC Network. Like, they've got a bunch of different stuff that's only been available if you have some sort of cable subscription or like YouTube TV or things like that. So I actually do really like this. When I first heard the price of $30 a month, I'm like, oh, that's a lot of money. But then I got thinking about it. It's also a lot of content for $30. And so it's really not a horrible price, because especially like if you're paying for something like YouTube TV or any of those type of like Direct TV or Dish or anything like that because of sports, this is going to cut your bill at least in half, if not a lot more. If all you really care about is the sports, then there you go. Now, obviously, you're going to be missing out on some of the sports stuff, like obviously Fox Sports and stuff like that. It's not there. Some TNT has sports, different channels like that. But there's a lot of stuff that comes on ESPN. I actually kind of like it. Now, they do have a bunch of new bundles because obviously Disney has all the things you can bundle with this. And right now, actually, they do have a special bundle that is basically like it's a launch offer that you can get ESPN and Disney Plus and Hulu, both of which are the ad-supported versions, for that $30 a month. So basically, you pay for ESPN, you get Disney Plus and Hulu ads for free. Now, if you wait too long, if you can get that same bundle for $36 a month, which still is not horrible. You're paying $6 more, and you're getting all of ESPN and then Disney and Hulu with ads. You can get the ESPN by itself, like I said, for $30 a month, or you can pay annually. That's $300 annually, and that'll save you $60 over the price or over the year. So a little bit of a discount if you pay for it for the year. They have the ESPN Plus or okay. I can't even keep these all straight. ESPN Select, which is basically what ESPN Plus is right now, for $12 a month. And then you can get ESPN Select with Disney and Hulu, all with ads, for $17 a month. And then ESPN Select with Disney and Hulu with no ads for $27 a month. And then, this is the last one. It was ESPN Unlimited, so the regular, like full ESPN, Disney Plus with no ads, and Hulu with no ads for $45 a month. So they've got a lot of different things, a lot of different bundles there now that all include different versions of ESPN, different versions of Disney, different versions of Hulu, all different prices. If you're really interested, you can go do some research yourself. But honestly, I don't think it's the worst idea from Disney. I think it's actually really smart for them to finally let ESPN be its own thing, because, like I said, there are a lot of people that pay more for their cable or their satellite TV plans because they want all the ESPN and sports channels. So being able to get that as a standalone thing, I think will save some people some money, and I like that.
Yeah, not too bad. All right, we're going to get into some gaming news here. This one here, even Steam's data breaches are better than everyone else's.
Yep. So this one is great. It was not during this past week, but it was like late the week before. Somebody posted about a massive data breach on Steam that revealed information for literally millions of Steam accounts. Steam, or Valve did some research, came back with an analysis of the situation. They had looked at the data that had been breached, that had been shared, and in essence, what it consisted of in its entirety was the text messages for two-factor authentication that included, that was just, the authentication codes that were sent as a part of the 2FA process, all of which have a shelf life of about 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And all of which were like literally years old. These text messages were associated with phone numbers. None of the phone numbers were even associated with accounts. So it was literally just phone number, two-factor authentication code that literally nobody can use because A, we don't know what account it relates to, and B, it expired actually years ago. And so Steam was all like, there's no actual account data that's been breached, no account details, no customer information. Steam servers have not been breached. Steam's information is completely secure. You don't change your passwords unless you want to. Like, if you want to, never a bad idea to update your password periodically. But there were no password leaks. No usernames were leaked. No, nothing about your library has been leaked. This didn't even come from us. In essence, we're pretty sure this is somebody hacked a telecom somewhere. And that's how they got this data, because it did not come from us. And so, yeah, Steam in the crosshairs of a massive, 21st century data breach. And it comes out the other side with Valve going, so what? come at me, bro. Like this this is meaningless. So yes, even when they're having, or they're the subject of headlines about giant data breaches, Steam is just looking better than everyone else. So good job, Valve.
Yeah, good job. Oh, that's funny. All right. Well, something I guess I thought was worth mentioning on this next topic. Qualcomm's job listing show Xbox and Surface product on ARM. So most people thinking this might be just the handheld, the not what do we call it? Not released handheld, or not said that confirmed handheld. That,
not announced.
Not announced.
The theoretical rumored. Yeah.
For Xbox stuff, but they did say both Surface and Xbox products built in Snapdragon solutions. So, yeah. I mean, okay.
Here's what I'm going to say. Xbox, just because Microsoft is pushing all of their Surface devices onto Qualcomm chips, it doesn't mean you have to. Like, you don't have to. It's okay.
Yeah.
Go to AMD. Go work with AMD on this.
Yeah.
They're going to give you an x86 architecture that you're already familiar with. They're going to give you built-in graphics that can actually play games, which is all you're going to be doing. So I don't know if anybody's been paying attention to how well these like Qualcomm-powered Surface products actually play games, but
Not
Xbox,
well.
please don't. Please don't.
We know you want everything to be an Xbox. Just don't do that one.
It's okay. You could just work with AMD. They're good at it.
So I'm sure there's going to be more of that to come. I'm assuming, this is just me predicting, that we will see more during June in the showcase. They may mention something about it, so we'll see.
Seems likely.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, that's the last thing we have here, unless, Landon, you have one more thing for us?
No.
Dang, I was half expecting to hear my own voice say Yahoo, but sorry.
I mean, I can
Not
play
this
that
time.
if you want, just for fun.
Not really, but all right, listener, we appreciate you listening to the end of the episode. And if you want to get a hold of us, you can on our social media platforms, as well as callingallplatforms.com. You can check out our YouTube channel over there, Calling All Platforms. Watch one of the videos again, leave a comment, say we need more videos for something if you want, or suggest something to Caleb, or get on the Patreon and say, Caleb, finally, here you go. Something. All right, dear listener, have a good week.
Bye-bye.
See ya.
Yahoo! Calling All Platforms is a production of Supporter Sound Studios. To learn more about how you can support the podcast, go to www.patreon.com/callingallplatforms.